Through 30 years of rain, snow and summer heat, Stanley Park's longest resident has been living outside and content.
You know, you can get 4 or 5 weeks in a row without sun. And I'm perfectly comfortable. I have no time schedule usually except my own.
Somehow he's survived and he's kind of thriving, really.
From his campsite in the forest, Chris Bailey ventures out often by bike.
So these are just inner tubes.
His ride rigged up to support anything he might need to carry.
When it gets loaded up, like for groceries, there's, I'd estimate like 200 pounds on the bike before I get on.
These days, he buys his food, but in the early years, Chris would feed himself by dumpster diving or catching wild geese and ducks.
It was easy to do. Get some grain, go down to the water, throw it at the grain in the water, they show up, you bag one, pluck it, and you go down to the beach, build a fire and roast it.
Determined to be self-sufficient, he often refused offers of food vouchers and clothing.
He never took anything from us. I think at one point I got him a pair of shoes just because his were so wet, and he was so grateful and so thankful.
With a talent for painting, Chris worked sign-writing jobs around the city, and he stayed connected with technology by travelling to UBC and spending up to 20 hours a week in the computer library.
The patterns of living and subsiding were basically by what I was able to think up. One of the happiest periods of my life was that period decade forward. My income at that time was less than $300 per year, per annum, for that 10-year period forward. See, I love this part.
Life here is centred around the forest.
Tell me what you like about this particular tree.
Looking at it from here, I think that's an incredible look at it.
Plants and animals all playing a role in Chris's journey through art and self-development.
You're in this place, there's no involvement. You're not studying a book that says, do this for tone and shade, or any teacher, instructor. It's between you and the natural world.
In 2017, everything changed.
As a result, I think, of some of the nutrition deficiencies and a contact with contaminated water, that resulted in some skin conditions.
Chris started becoming sick. He travelled over the Lionsgate Bridge and received help from a clinic on the North Shore. With no ID, he was then referred to the Canadian Mental Health Association and paired with a caseworker named Jeff.
He arranged for legal forms for me to sign, which swore that I was the person that I said I was.
Chris was set up with a bank account and a pension, suddenly making $600 a month.
And you'd never had that much money before.
Yeah, I was flabbergasted, right?
He could buy himself a phone and start an Instagram account for his art. But his skin condition required surgery after doctors discovered a benign tumour. A $1,000 hospital bill came across the desk of his caseworker.
But when it was apparent that there was something that it might not be covered, Jeff said he would pay for it, you know.
Wow. Wow.
He was that kind of guy. Yeah, he was great. All right.
Does that make you a bit emotional thinking about that?
Thinking back, yeah, let me drink water here.
Yeah.
Seeing him almost cry made me cry.
Yeah.
Jeff Bodnerick now lives in the interior. He worked with Chris for 2 years.
I enjoyed talking to him and listening to some of his stories and how he grew up. I remember him bringing out his sketchbook and being very proud of his sketchbook.
It was his job to find out who Chris was.
And just remember trying to get those breadcrumbs on where he was born.
Through his connections, Jeff was the one who managed to get Chris a bank account, even without identification.
You know, I figured the guy was eligible for sainthood myself, you know, with what he had accomplished. And
by this point, Chris had spent 27 years living alone in Stanley Park.
Did you have any discussions about trying to get him out of the park?
No, because that's not what he wanted.
In 2019, Chris was preparing to leave, but Jeff had left his role and the process of getting Chris a passport stalled. His case fell through the cracks.
How much longer do you think you'll be staying here?
I don't know. It's up in the air.
His time in Stanley Park is coming to an end, but what's next is unknown.